Okay, so hear me out. I know this might sound absolutely ridiculous, but I played around with it and I actually think it's pretty cool. Like, I think it might actually be useful. So AI is a very controversial topic these days. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone's scared it'll take over the world or it'll take over your job. And I mean, to some degree, I think I agree that might happen. And I know that there's gonna be like some cult of purists who will just refuse to consume any media where AI had any part in the creation of it. There'll be like products or works of art that are certified AI free, and that's fine. I mean, there are people who only like analog stuff. Like they'll only support movies shot on film and they don't like digital, and that's also fine. But it's pretty crazy how all of a sudden AI has just become so prevalent and so competent, it seems. Or is it? I wanna put it to the test a little bit today. A while ago, I saw how ChatGPT was being used to basically just write code. I think the very first thing I personally saw along those lines was someone use it to like generate a Blender script, but I thought I would give it a go and see if it could write some C++ code for me and do like a little code review on it and to see like what that code was like. Like, was it acceptable code? Was it good quality code? Could it actually be useful to a C++ programmer to have it generate code for you? I mean, when you think about it, it really makes sense. Like, it really does, I think, because programming is such a mechanical thing. Like, humans, I think, try to convert it into an art form. Like, people will actively try their best to make the code look clean, really easy to read. Like, the beauty of the actual code, you know, it almost becomes like a poem written by a poet. Like, you want the code to look nice. And that does have some merit, right? Because obviously humans are the ones who are going to be reading and writing that code. So it makes sense to make it more aesthetic for them, to make it more kind of simple and easy to understand and maintain. Like, that's to the benefit of the product as a whole. But when it comes down to executing the code, does the computer care about that? No. And often this art form of programming will actually be detrimental to the program, to the software, because all of this abstraction that goes on top of it can actually hurt the performance of the code. And not only that, but we as humans, like, you know, we're not computers, like we write bugs all the time. We can not be careful and wind up with a memory leak or something. So in a way, if you think about it, if I could write code mechanically to be optimized for, you know, a given architecture, a given CPU, or whatever hardware I'm executing it on, and I could make sure that I obviously didn't write any memory leaks or bugs because I am a mechanical being, wouldn't that be a good thing? I wonder who's good at that. AI. If we can tell a really highly trained AI model to write some code for me, generate me some code that, I don't know, does this, that creates a data structure like a resizable array, it's not gonna make the same mistakes that a student probably would in university trying to replicate that. Like where they forget to free some memory, or maybe they're copying a string and they forget about the null termination character and suddenly that could cause a problem down the road. Like, that stuff just wouldn't happen. And not only can the AI generate you basically perfect code that is bug-free and leak-free, it also understands context. Once it's written the first version for you, you can ask it to change some stuff up, to fix some stuff up. And it also seems to actually understand how the code works and why it does what it does. You can literally ask it just in English to please explain to me, what is this thing? I don't understand this thing. Or can you just go through and just flat out annotate every single line of code with a comment that explains how it works? Like, I'm not kidding, it's pretty wild. And I honestly think there's so many use cases for it where maybe you just need to quickly write an algorithm. Why waste your time doing that yourself manually and in a possibly imperfect, bug-filled way when you could just get AI to generate that code snippet for you? Like, it just makes so much sense. And if you feel threatened by that, then I'm sorry. Anyway, all of these examples that I just talked about, like with the resizable array, we're gonna take a look at that today. I'm gonna show you my experience with AI and C++. Now, while we're on the topic of AI and how useful it can be, let me tell you about the sponsor of today's video, Grammarly Go. Grammarly Go provides you with personalized generative AI communication assistance that can really help you with your productivity. Now, one of the coolest features of Grammarly Go is the fact that you can set a voice. You can specify like a tone or a style of how you want the generated text to sound. And so if I'm trying to generate some text for like a game that I'm making and I want some kind of, I don't know, emergency announcement to take place for the evacuation of a ship or something, I can tell it how I want it to sound. I can say that I want it to sound like formal, for example, and then just tell it, hey, generate me some emergency evacuation announcement. But again, using the power of AI, I can come back to that and be like, well, no, I mean, this part needs to be a bit different. There are no elevators here, let's talk about lifeboats instead. Aside from just flat out generating text, another really useful use case is to take pieces of text you've already generated. So for example, we have a bunch of stuff here in our Hazel documentation for our game engine, and we can just plug this into Grammarly and get Grammarly Go to like rewrite and improve sections of that text that we've already written to make it sound a particular way. So for example, this like opening statement here, I want it to sound a little bit more formal, maybe a bit more stern, a bit more assertive. I can tell Grammarly Go to do that. And as you can see, it will rewrite the text and make it sound the way that I want it to sound. And you know, as someone who has to write documentation for my game engine from time to time, and I don't want to spend time on that, really, I'd rather be writing the code for the game engine. But the documentation just needs to exist. And so instead of having to think about how on earth am I gonna phrase this, I can get Grammarly Go to help me out and save me time. There are lots of other exciting features to check out. You'll be amazed what you can achieve with Grammarly Go. You can sign up using my link in the description below, grammarly.com/Cherno, and you'll get 20% off Grammarly Premium. Huge thank you to Grammarly for sponsoring this video. Okay, now that it's nightfall. Hi. Wow, well that took like 10 seconds to generate for some reason. Do you know any C++? Oh. Excellent, because I have an assignment due like yesterday. All right. How do I make a resizable array? Let's start with that. Let's pretend that we're trying to like do some assignment that is told us to like write a resizable array. All right, so it's generating some codes, pretty quick, not gonna lie. This is kind of interesting what it's doing, because like, as far as I can see, this is just all in the main function, right? And look, it's gonna explain everything. In this example, okay, let's start at the beginning. In C++, you can create a resizable array. So this is the prompt, right? How do I make a resizable array? In C++, and you can see that I said, do you know any C++? And so because I said that, it has the context to know that when I say, how do I make a resizable array, I'm talking about C++. So that's pretty cool. You can create a resizable array using dynamic memory allocation. Here's an example of how you can create a resizable array. Okay, so what it's done is it's actually written me a full-on program. Like, let's copy this code just before we continue. I've got a fresh Visual Studio project here, ai.cpp. Let's just complete blank file, paste it in. Let's see like if this compiles, because it prints stuff as well. I'm just gonna hit F5. Okay, so it's definitely printed some stuff. I don't see anything crashing. Like, it full on just gave me an example. Now at this stage, of course, you could have just gotten that example from a website that had that example. But the power, I guess, comes from the fact that we can ask it to tweak this code if we want. So let's first of all read through it and see how good of a job it did. So we have this array of size 5. Again, extremely arbitrary. This is probably not what your assignment would want you to do. The size is 5, which we're kind of manually keeping track of, and there's also a capacity of 5. You can see it's actually added comments without even me. Again, the only thing I prompted was this. It's adding comments that explain every line of code. Populate the array with some values. Here it is, just randomly generating some values, I plus 1. So the first one will be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's what we see printed over here. This decided to print it along with a space. Could have used a char for this instead of an entire string, because it's just one character. Interesting that it chose not to. Increase the size of the array. So if size equals capacity. Okay, so interestingly enough, it's in this example, it's created an array deliberately of size 5, added 5 elements to it over here, and then of course size is going to be equal to capacity because it's done that here deliberately, which is actually kind of interesting. So then it doubles the capacity over here, right? So we go from 5 to 10. It loops through, copies every item, deletes the old array, replaces this with the temporary thing that we allocated, which is no longer temporary because now it's the main array. And then we also make sure to set capacity. So size hasn't changed because we still have 5 elements, but the capacity is doubled now. So we can add 5 more things. And we start at size, which is, this is like, it's really interesting. It's almost blowing my mind how like This is a specific example. I wonder if this exists somewhere on the internet. It's just like pulled something off the internet. Like this is actually someone's example on a blog post or something like that. I don't know. I'm not going to Google it and try and find out, but it's just interesting because it's such a specific example, right? This is in a way demonstrating how resizable array could work, but it's completely useless because it's not like you can actually use this code. It's not like it's packaged it into a class or something that you can just reuse. It's just kind of just been like, there's like all the different things that a dynamic array or a resizable array could do. And here they are individually. And here's like almost a test that proves that it works, which is interesting. I mean, to be fair, like I did ask, how do I make a resizable array? I didn't tell it, make me one that I can actually use for my assignment, please. It was more like, how does it almost work is what I was asking. And then it explains that it creates an array of size 5, populates it, checks to see if the size is equal to capacity. If it is, create a new array. So this is interesting because it's kind of like, but why are you doing this? Like, this isn't really necessary. This is just you explaining your code, but like in a very like fine-grained way. It's kind of like, then we check this if size is equal to capacity, which that doesn't really need to be explained. What would have been better was probably to explain, but why are you doing this in the first place? And really, it's just to prove that resizing works, I guess. We then add more elements. Finally, we print the memory allocated. Okay, can you put this functionality into a class? Let's see what it does here. So resizable array class in C++. Okay, cool. So we have a class called resizable array now. Okay, so then we have capacity. Interesting that it wrote cap here and not capacity. I guess it didn't want to confuse the two capacities. So it chose cap, but that's kind of interesting. So initializes it with a capacity. So you have to provide a capacity here when you use this. It's got a pushback function, much like the standard template library. Oh yeah, it's also using integers. So this is an array of integers and integers only. I guess int is kind of like the default type in C++. I don't know if that's more of a C thing, but like if it can't find certain types, ints are like assumed. So it's maybe that has something to do with why it just happened to choose that out of all things it could have. But it also provided an example. I was about to ask it to give me an example of it using it, but check this out. We have a resizable array, 5 elements. Again, 5 it chose. This time you can see the functionality for resizing is actually inside what it wrote. So pushback will resize, which means that it doesn't have to do it here. It can just make the array of 5, but then try and add 10. And that will just work. And then we can go through all the elements and print it. Which, yeah, it's pretty cool. Return 0, which we don't actually need, by the way. AI. But yeah, that's interesting. And then it kind of explains it, which we'll skip over. Okay, not bad. But I don't want to just use it with ints. I want to use it with every type. So maybe like, can you make this into a templated class so I can use it with any type? Let's ask it to do that. And as you can see, it's generating us a templated version that uses t instead of int. So this is kind of like, this is the thing that's really cool. The fact that you can kind of talk to this thing and be like, that's 90% of the way there, but actually tweak this one thing, right? And actually what I'm noticing here is that it's not really like, it doesn't have comments. My university professor wants comments. So one of the things I'm going to ask it is basically, it's still generating, but I'll just be like, can you please, because I'm a nice person, annotate the code with comments? I guess I'll wait for it to finish generating here. It's like explaining everything. This is totally useful because the thing is, like, you know, it explains everything. So I'm assuming that, like, if you have questions, you know, like if I had a specific question, like why are you doing, like, why are you doubling the capacity? Actually, that's a nice question. Why are you specifically doubling it? Because the standard template library, I think by default will add 50% to it. So like it'll take half the capacity and add that. I don't know if that's just like, if that's all the compilers do that, like for, you know, GCC, MSVC, Clang, but yeah, I don't know. Okay, here's the same code as before, but you can see now we have comments. Now we have comments on every single line of code that tells us what it does, right? And there's even a copy code button. Like, they've made this too easy. Let's just paste this in now, right? Of course, everything compiles. It didn't seem to copy everything. It's still generating, that's why. I haven't finished. All right, let's copy that again. I was too quick. You gotta wait. You gotta wait, man. Unless you have ChatGPT Plus. Whoa, toString is undefined. Bro, he forgot to include string. F. That's an F. All right, let's run this. Yeah, I mean, like, it's here. Element 1, element 2. Like, yeah, it's printing stuff. It's working. It's not crashing or anything. Okay, so let me just ask it, like, why are you doubling the capacity when a resize is necessary? Can you add 50% instead? Let's see what it does here. Doubling the capacity is a common strategy. Is it? Who does that though? I've never seen a library that does that. Yeah, like what it would use more memory if you do this. Like you wouldn't have to do it as often though. Is also a valid strategy. So change the code to increase capacity by 50% because that's one of the requirements of my university assignment. So let's see. So look, when a resize is necessary, that's the language I used. I said when a resize is necessary. So it's kind of mimicking what I'm saying, which is really interesting because I feel like that itself would be helpful to people just because it's echoing back some of the stuff that you say, which I feel like would make the student kind of understand, or the program understand, you know, what it's saying more because it's using similar language. It's kind of like, you know, it's like when a friend comes over and you adopt a little bit of their style, just like specifically with that friend. And that's what I feel like is happening here, which is, yeah, a nice touch, I guess. All right, so let's see what happens here. What is the size? Yeah, there it is. New capacity, capacity plus capacity divided by 2. That's what I'm used to seeing. So that's just amazing. Just like, hey man, can you change this thing? Now, obviously, like this is just like, I mean, you can go in by yourself if you understand anything at all and be like, you know, instead of ×2, let me just do, well, that plus, you know, plus capacity divided by 2, because that's kind of what it's done. But like, you know, the fact that you can just tell it like, hey, can you please do that for me, is amazing. Now, if I had to code review this code, like, I mean, you know me, I would change a bunch of stuff. I wouldn't have the private members up the top. I'd have them down the bottom. It's a bit weird that you have to take in a capacity. Like, why can't it just decide on a capacity? But I'm sure you could just keep asking it. Like, hey, I don't want to take in a capacity. Choose a sensible default. Using namespace STD, I definitely wouldn't use. In fact, like, why did you use that? Let's ask like why it did that. And like the thing is, you can see that it explains it, like because it didn't leave me a comment. So I don't know what this does if I'm a student, or I don't understand. I've never seen this before. Like why, what does that do? I can ask it what it does and it literally will be like, example, instead of doing that, then you can do that instead. Now, however, it is generally considered bad practice to using namespaces, okay, in header files. I was going to say if it just says in general, that's funny that it's used it. Because it can cause naming conflicts with other libraries or your own code. Yes, I agree. I have a video called Why I Don't Using Namespace STD. That's an old one. It's a blast from the past, but you can check it out up there. But in small programs or scripts, it's generally acceptable. So let me just say, so if it's bad practice, why have you used it? Now, of course, it did say it's bad practice in a header file. That wasn't a header file, but I just want to see what it says. Why have you used it? As an AI language model, I've used it in the code exams prior for the sake of brevity and readability. Yep, that's a good answer. However, in actual code development, generally recommended to avoid it. Again, it repeats itself in header files or in large code bases. Can you change your code to not have it then? Because I want to become a better C++ programmer and build good habits. Certainly, here's the same code without the using namespace. So it's removed it. Dynamic, wait, did it change the name? It was a resizable array. Now it's dynamic array. Why did it do that? Whoa, it completely changed everything. Look, now we have M underscore. Wait, is that because, oh, bro, the private stuff is at the bottom. Did it just read my mind? I didn't tell it. I didn't tell it to do that. What? Is that because I was claiming it was bad practice and I want to become a better C++ programmer? So it literally implemented like better C++ programming, like by having private at the bottom and using M underscore for like members, for private members. Holy smokes. I did not expect that. And then it does capacity times 1.5. And then look, resize. Resize has now become its own function. So, okay, I'm seeing two things here, right? Either it was like, I need a copy of a resizable array data structure without this. So let me look at my database of like examples that I have learned from and just pick up another one that just happens to not have that. Either it's done that and it's just like, you know, selected a different like, you know, template almost of a dynamic array data structure, or it's actually just gone in and improved the code, because this is obviously a better written like data structure, like a better written class, I guess, than what we kind of saw before. But that is wild. All I did was ask it to do that. Oh, I really wish I could, like, wait, can I go back? What does this do? I almost kind of want to, what if I do regenerate response? Okay, there's resizable array again, and there's private up the top. And that's the old class. But now, obviously, it's, SCD. There's no using namespace SCD, so it has to do SCD everywhere. Huh, that's really interesting. So that's actually what I basically asked for. But I just wonder if it was, like, if it truly, and it gives me an example of different types as well, which is cool. I wonder if it was truly, like, trying to improve the programming, like, without me even asking, because I said some stuff like that. But this is so fun. Can you write this class more professionally, like a real software engineer would? Now, that's very, very subjective, obviously, but I'm just wondering, like, what it would do. Okay, it has some best practices and design patterns. Private still at the top, buddy. Oh, now it's using size T. And now it's got underscore. See, the thing is, like, obviously, like, there's no right way to write C++. There's all of these. Oh, man, this is a completely different class. Wow. We'll get into this in a minute. But, like, there's obviously no correct way, like, especially when it comes to subjective things like private, I like to have at the bottom. I like to use M underscore, which it kind of, like, it almost gave me the class I wanted, which is very suspicious. But here it's got, like, an underscore after, which is really weird, which just kind of makes it, be different. So it can do like capacity underscore capacity without having to do like this dot or this arrow capacity equals capacity or whatever, if the names are the same. But I would just use M underscore, obviously. But like, let's take a look at what it's done. I might copy this into Visual Studio so we can actually do a proper code review. But like, this is, and of course it explains why it's done this thing. It's added a default argument for the capacity. It's changed these to be size T's instead, which is, the type used by the standard library. That's true. Rename the data members to use an underscore suffix. Interestingly enough, yeah, for improved readability. That's improved readability in the sense that you can tell it's a member. But again, I would use M underscore personally. Added a copy constructor and copy assignment operator. That's good. And changed the get method to use that operator for accessing elements and made the method const to indicate. And we're out of gas apparently. But anyway, let's take this code and let's do a little code review. And let's see. Okay, I don't get any compile errors this time. Got some stuff here. Okay, so yeah, again, I would put this, let's rewrite this how I would maybe as I'm doing the code review. Let's kind of make this be at the bottom. I won't bother with the variable names. I don't know if I would use, I personally would just use size T like that, but that's because like, these headers that I use like in MSVC, they actually have that. I'm not sure if that would apply to all compilers and all platforms. Maybe that's why it's chosen to do this. Okay, so we have new T capacity, so that gets allocated there. It's made the constructor explicit, which means you can't just, be like resizable array. Did it generate? Yeah, you can't basically be like, that equals 5 like that because it's explicit. If I remove explicit, then you can see that's possible. So in other words, they've added that just to make it like less likely that you'll accidentally, do an implicit conversion from an integer into an entire resizable array, which could happen. Then we have a copy constructor. We don't have any move, like we don't have a move constructor, but that's okay. There's our destructor. Yeah, that's pretty standard. Like it's using std copy here to copy. Then we've got, yeah, so I mean, it's just changed up the variable names. This is like all correct, pretty standard boilerplate. It's interesting that it's not dropping these guys onto a new line. Different code conventions, obviously, different rule sets, like will, yeah, have different rules. Resize, yeah, so it's changed capacity plus capacity divided by 2 to 1.5 times capacity, which is also fine, although that involves using a double, which I mean eventually gets downcast to a UNT64T basically, but I don't know if I would do that over. But then you have an integer division. I don't know. Whatever. Either way is fine. Yeah, resize. Okay, it's even added exceptions. Maybe that's part of the being more professional as well. We actually have the ability to kind of debug in a way, because if we're out of range, it won't just crash or have a memory access violation. It'll actually throw an out of range exception. Size returns size. We got the const there, which is good. Capacity. And yeah, no, I mean, that's a pretty clean class. Like, yeah, I don't know. Like, this just looks like a standard class. Like, you couldn't really tell, obviously, that this is generated by AI or anything like that. It just looks like a normal class. So, yeah, no, man, this is fascinating. I really want to keep digging into this. If you guys want to see more AI videos with C++, like, let me know. Suggest some topics in the comments below, because I don't know, I might keep playing around with this, to be honest. It's really, really fascinating. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to hit the like button. Don't forget to check out grammarly.com/Cherno. Link will be in the description below. And I will see you next time. Goodbye.